On the line now is Kim Seeling-Smith, a future work expert. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Jackie.
Okay, I've got so many questions for you today. First of all, do you support this push by the government?
Well, I do and I don't. I do from a standpoint of the research is really clear that providing a hybrid working environment is good for the business, it's good for the people, it's good for customers, it's good all the way around. What I don't agree with is mandating, because I think that we just need to move past policies, procedures, and regulations and learn how to manage people effectively and how to treat people like human beings.
Well, haven't we kind of reached, I thought, Kim, we'd kind of reached a good equilibrium where most employees, if they decide to take a job, they will negotiate with the employer as to how much of that job is available to be done from home. Why does the government need to get involved?
Well, that's exactly right. And that's exactly right. And the problem is that we are backsliding. And unfortunately, it's being driven by the states. Something like 75% of Fortune 100 companies are now mandating people back into the office 5 days a week. And, we tried this before the federal election. Dutton said that he was going to do that, and he backtracked that because it was such an unpopular policy. We're trying it here in Australia, unfortunately. And I think that is the intention behind this legislation, but I don't believe that it should be legislated. I do, however, believe that managers need to do a better job of figuring out how to effectively manage people and how to have those adult conversations with people who are not able to work from home. Because let's face it, if you have to rock up to a work site, if you're in construction, if you're in manufacturing, if you have to be at a showroom for customer service or a hotel or a cafe, you cannot work from home. But that doesn't mean that we should implement a one-size-fits-all policy. We need to have adult conversations and help people understand what working from home means, what the duties and responsibilities are, what the advantages are, and why some jobs just can't be offered
but
that.
What about small business, for example, right? And someone injures themselves while they're working from home, and say this employer has 10 employees. He or she may not have an overly big company. They may not have enough money. Can the employee that's working from home sue the employer if they have an accident at home?
Yeah, as I understand it, Jackie, that's a bit of a gray area. And Scotty was right. That is a concern. Now, I am not a legal expert in any way, shape, or form, so I cannot quote the legislation to you. But as I understand it, it's a bit of a gray area. And that is absolutely a risk and a concern that employers should have, and something that we should push back on the Victorian government about. What are the rights and responsibilities of employers? What is the duty of care if somebody's working from home? Absolutely big concern. And it's not, I'm not saying that hybrid work or working from home is not without its challenges. It absolutely is without its challenges. But I would have thought that 5 years past COVID lockdowns, we would have figured this out by now, and we just haven't.
Have you not seen this government, Kim? We don't figure much out. In this state. We tend to have a lot of discussion, but we don't actually do much. But I guess my other question as well is twofold. One is, if you can do something from home, is there a possibility that a bigger company, say a big bank or a company like that, goes, you know what, I can do this overseas and I can do it cheaper because I don't need a human body in the office?
Yeah, we're seeing that now, actually. It's funny you should mention that, because I just wrote an article about the redundancies here in Australia, the layoffs in the United States that are happening because of AI implementation. And unfortunately, a lot of employers are hitting the redundancy button before they figure out how they're actually going to replace those skills. And it's going to become a huge, huge problem. So if you're out there listening, my number one suggestion is to get your head across AI to figure out how it can help you do your job better, faster, more effectively, more efficiently. And if you're working from home, by God, you better be working from home, and you better be able to prove your worth, just like anybody in the office. But I think, people who do work from home 2-3 days a week are under additional scrutiny. So
yeah. Well, also, if you're not front of mind and you're working from home, can you be overlooked for things too because you're not in the office?
Absolutely. That's a problem. And we're seeing some research around that as well. Companies have tried have tried to say, well, if you're not in the office, we are going to mark you down. And that has backfired against companies by overtly stating that. However, if you aren't front of mind, if you aren't, rocking up to the office sufficiently, or at least having Teams chats or, whatever your communication cadence is in the office, if you're not front of mind, if you're not achieving your goals, proving your worth, and having some face time with your boss, you absolutely do run the risk of being overlooked.
Thank you, Kim. That's Kim Seeling-Smith. She's a business futurist. What an interesting chat. So one, AI, it's going to take all of our jobs, so you better get your butt into the office, because at least then it can't take your job if you're physically there and needed. And two, on this grey area she speaks of, when it comes to the office and the safety of having an office at home. If you fall over, can you sue your employer? Is your employer a small business that can't afford to have these kind of risks, but the government is mandating you to work from home for 2 days if you want it? I really think, as Kim said, around the world, everyone's kind of found where it's landed, and most people are pretty comfortable with this as a discussion. But then the government comes in over the top and goes, bang, you now have the legal right for that. And I do think that's an overstep.